falling few. Rest your hair, you fallen traveler. Take my bed and dream my dreams. Dream my dreams. I see them falling, crawling. I see them all crawling. Few on their knees, begging, please don't take my hands away too. My hands away too. Empathy was all the angels I never see. I've seen the fallen brawling. I've seen them all, the brawling few, fighting hard to right the wrongs, looking back at what they do.
Everybody, it's the 11th of July and it's about close to 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday. It's winter here in New Zealand at the moment, although you wouldn't know it today because it's about 15 degrees at the moment. But we have had a lot of rain recently, and we're about 2 weeks into the cold part of our New Zealand winter. So this is just a quick update video to let everybody who's paying attention to my channel understand why it is that I haven't posted a podcast for about, it must be almost 2 months now. I've had a couple of emails from people asking what the story is, so I thought I had better, now that the problem that has been going on has pretty much solved itself, I am in a position to explain the whole situation in a bit of detail while saying that we're back on the back in business again as far as producing podcasts are concerned. So about 5 weeks ago I think, Microsoft in their infinite wisdom decided to do a full operating system upgrade for Windows 10. Anybody who doesn't know much about Windows 10, if you don't run it on your computer, upgrades of the operating system are compulsory now. You can't stop that process unless you know a bit of technical detail about how to switch things on and off inside the operating system. So I came home from work one night. The upgrade notice was on my desktop when I booted up. So I allowed Microsoft to take over my machine and perform the upgrade. Usually they only take about 15 minutes or so. They download all the bits and pieces of software, reboot the system, takes a little while to get back to the desktop, and then you're right. But this time, 2.5 hours later, after a bunch of nag screens from Microsoft assuring me that they're a wonderful software company and that I should put the security and productiveness of their operating system entirely in their hands. The desktop then booted up. Half the icons were missing. The cursor was functional, but nothing else was working. So basically, the system had frozen. Some of the cursors weren't on the taskbar that should be there. Couldn't open the start menu. And I couldn't find any way of changing what had happened. Like, basically, the system froze as soon as the boot up process was over. So, like, I obviously was not impressed at all. It took me about a day to figure out how to restore Windows 7, which the laptop originally came with. Right from the get-go, I had seriously regretted taking Microsoft up on its free offer of Windows 10 and had tried a number of times to reinstall Windows 7. So eventually I figured out how to do it. Interrupting the boot up process, there was an option there to restore Windows 7. So I had about a week of running Windows 7. I got right up to almost finishing editing the next podcast and my laptop died. It started off with the fan stopped functioning, and then after I cleaned out the fan, I couldn't get the laptop to boot up again. So this was on a Friday night. I had to wait till after the weekend to go into town and buy a new computer. So I've decided to switch from laptop to desktop again, which I haven't had one for years, since Windows XP days. But it has a 20-inch monitor, which makes editing video and graphics a lot easier. But of course it also meant that the new computer had a factory installed copy of Windows 10, so I was back to where I started from. And you would think that factory installed, brand new computer, factory installed Windows 10, everything would run smoothly. But after about 3 days of reinstalling all the software that I use for things like video editing and graphics editing and trying to get everything running again, for some reason Windows 10, every time I was using it, every day I was using it, at least twice a day, it would randomly shut itself down. It would give a warning notice of 60 seconds to a shutdown. It wouldn't allow you to save any of your work, and it would just close the system down. It wasn't an overheating processor, and it wasn't software or hardware conflicts at all. So it was something in the operating system itself. So I decided to do something which I had been promising myself for some time, which was to switch from Microsoft Windows to Linux. So I wiped the hard drive, installed a clean install of Linux Mint, and no dual boot system for Windows, because honestly I've had it up to here with Microsoft and Windows. You would think with all the money, all the software programmers that they have, and the amount of time that they've had to perfect their operating system, that there would be virtually nothing wrong with it now. So I just can't believe that it's still a piece of garbage, and that presently it's like worse than Windows 98 was back in the day. So Linux installed, relearning Linux. It's taken me about a week and a half. I used to have Ubuntu running on a laptop about 10 years ago, but there wasn't a lot of software available for Ubuntu back in those days. I loved Linux. It's fast, it's slick looking, and it's not stealing all your information and selling it to third parties. So I've had to spend the last week and a half finding new software to use, because Linux mostly does not use the same kind of software that Windows has available to it. So for example, you can't get Adobe Photoshop for Linux. As far as I know, you can't. All the software for Linux systems is coded specifically for Linux. It's all free, and nowadays most of it works as well or better than software which is specifically designed for Microsoft Windows. So I can do everything now on Linux that I had to rely on Windows for previously. So the fact that you're watching this update video now means that at the very least I've got the basics of producing video on Linux under control, and more or less I'm back in business again. So while you're watching this, I'm already in the process now of recompiling the next podcast that everyone's been waiting for, and that should be done within the next week or 2 weeks at most, providing nothing else goes wrong in the meantime. And pretty much I have made the firm decision never to go back to Windows again. The way Linux is now, it's so professional and there's so much software for it that there's no point in going back to Windows anyway. I think anybody who does that now really is only doing it because they aren't aware of the alternatives. And the fact of the matter is, nothing with Linux costs you any money. You can do exactly the same job that you did on Windows. The operating system is free and all the software is free, and it functions for the most part just as well as Windows software. So that's the first thing. Thanks for everybody who's been patient. My apologies for not being able to get this update onto the channel sooner, but hopefully this explains why now. Which brings me up to the present. Although I haven't had a good look at the golden chain to see exactly how far I'm going, the chances are this next podcast that you've all been waiting for on chapters 3 and 4 of the golden chain is going to be my second to last discussion of the golden chain. I'm only going to go up to chapter 4, it looks like, and then I'll do a summation of everything that I've discussed about the golden chain and the story it tells up to this point. Then the next series of videos that I will be doing will be on the laboratory alchemy tradition. I'll start probably with history, discuss a bit about the evolution of alchemy from my point of view, and I will then discuss the philosophy of alchemy itself, what it is that alchemists believe and what they're trying to achieve. And I'll be presenting this in a way that it will cover a lot of detail for the people who either know nothing about alchemy or believe they know a reasonable amount about alchemy, but in fact have accepted a lot of misunderstanding or erroneous concepts about alchemy. So sort all that stuff out first and discuss exactly what it is that alchemists do and have done in the past, what they are attempting to achieve, and where the condition of alchemy is at today in the modern world and where it's heading. So that's all for the moment. Thanks for being patient to those of you who are wondering what I've been up to and why it's taken so long to get the next podcast out. Hopefully 2 weeks that missing podcast will be up on YouTube for everybody to watch, and then more or less very soon afterwards we'll be into the next subject matter, which will be the history and primarily the philosophy of the alchemical laboratory tradition.
I see the falling, I see them all, the fallen few. Rest your head, you fallen child. Take my bed and dream my dreams. Dream my dreams.